All right. Travin Keith, how are you?
I'm doing all right. Just quick correction. Sorry, it's Travin Keith.
Travin. Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Everyone makes that mistake. Sometimes people even call me Kevin for
Oh,
some reason.
wow. Well, I didn't make that mistake.
Yes, that's good.
Okay. Travin, sorry.
No problem.
Right. So, tell me a little bit about you. I know that you're in the crypto space. So, what were you doing before crypto, and how did you get into crypto?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I first heard about crypto from my coworker. I was working in tech support at the time in college. His name's Aaron, and he said, "Hey, Traven, you should take a look at this thing called Bitcoin because you're into tech, and you're a business student, so this might interest you." Looked over his screen and said, "Bitcoin, $3." Hmm. Asked him what it is, and he said, like, "Oh, just internet money." It's like, "What can you do with it?" Nothing really. There's this thing called Silk Road, and he told me what Silk Road was, and I was like, "Dude, I'm trying to immigrate to the United States here. I don't want to touch any of this stuff."
Hmm.
But so shortly after the graduating, I ended up working for the web marketing startup that I was an intern for at the time. So things were going pretty well. I was focusing mostly on search engine optimization, content management, in general, web marketing advisory. Like I was also volunteering for a local food bank where I was staying. It's called Rainier Valley Food Bank.
Hmm.
And also just helped out small businesses around the Rainier Valley Chamber of Commerce. I'm very big around local communities and helping around. So yeah, just everything around that space. I didn't look into crypto again, and then yeah, I remember I was very happy. I got published on Search Engine Journal, which is one of the big web marketing websites, and I go home, I sit down, and I see my article up. I'm really happy. And I open Yahoo.com and I see Bitcoin hits $1,000, and I mean, it was just like a jerk reaction for me. I just grabbed my phone, called my friend Aaron, and it's like, Aaron! He didn't pick up. So just left that voicemail. I don't know if he still has that, but I sent him a message also, and I was like, dude, what's this? Like, if it hit 1,000, it must be something. Like, is this actually something? Why didn't you tell me it's actually something? Um, and no, he actually also got pissed at himself because he exited the market a long time before that. Uh, but no, I mean, so I started reading into it a lot more, and just diving into what Bitcoin was and what could it what it could do. And I loved that it was essentially uncensorable money. That I could send money to somebody and nobody would care about it. Well, okay, people would care about it, but they couldn't do anything about it. Unless they were minors also and wanted to censor my transaction, then maybe they could do something like delay it until another minor who said like, okay, it's fine, let it through. Um, yeah, so it was just very interesting for me. I mean, I'm from the Philippines. I don't really like send money back to the Philippines or anything, but it's very well known within Philippine communities that it's an important thing to send money back to their families. So, I mean, the fees for that tend to be quite low compared to what most people online quote because it's actually quite high volume. It really depends where you're sending from. Like sometimes in the States, you can send back to the Philippines and it's like $5 for almost amount, up to, of course, a very high threshold. So, but for me, still, like this was pretty cool. I could send money to anywhere in the world. Anyway, I started looking into technology. At the time, documentation was not very good. So today, it's a lot easier. Although there's many more things to read upon. At least with Bitcoin, it's better documented. Like I didn't understand what gave Bitcoin value at that time, and nobody could give me a straight answer until somebody finally did. And said it's because people want it. That's
Mm.
why it has value. Is because people like the tech and or like the economic principles around it,
Mhm.
um, or the brand, or just the brand. Like they don't understand all the other stuff, but they like the brand for it. That also still influences the price.
Right.
And yeah, I just kept digging more. Sorry, I'm gonna get a bit
No, that's
long.
fine. Yeah.
Um, I found this thing called Mastercoin. It was very interesting. They were trying to build on top of the Bitcoin blockchain, and they're still around. I mean, they're now known as Omni, home to Tether. So
Yeah.
still powering through, although most people don't know that Omni powers Tether. And I was on Bitcoin markets where I still hang around today. I'm one of the Slack administrators, and I lurk around the subreddit every now and then. I was complaining, like, when's this Mastercoin thing going to come out? And well, one, we weren't allowed to talk about anything not Bitcoin, but kind of that slipped through. Somebody sent me a message on IRC. So we were still on IRC back then, before Discord, before Slack. We were all on there. And I said, hey, check out this thing called NXT. And I was like, what is that? It's like, it's Mastercoin, but except it's out now.
Oh, wow.
And I said, okay, that's interesting. Let me take a look. And, the client back then was pretty bad, but I mean, well, I guess compared to most of the core clients, it's not that bad if you think about it. But no, it's very interesting. They achieved the thing called colored coins, which are assets which are now generally known as tokens today. But NXT was the first one, and it had a very interesting background with an anonymous developer named BC Next. So it had the same like lore kind of thing around Satoshi. So yeah, I kind of followed that project. I also tried to follow Dogecoin, because Dogecoin was just so fun to follow with the
Dogecoin was awesome.
Yeah, I have a physical Dogecoin. That was the first physical crypto that I got, and I still have it. It's one Doge, so it's like nobody's gonna rob me for that. But and you can still buy it, I think. I don't know, but no, it was pretty great. It was really fun what they did. I mean, the whole community aspect. It was just fun to be around.
Yeah.
When they sponsored Josh Wise, and when Josh won one race, or like got podium in one race, it was like, wow, Dogecoin's on the freaking podium. And so that was just really fun to follow. And they've sponsored an African national team for bobsledding. I mean, yeah, they came in last, but still, it was pretty fun to see that around. And it's just something that it was like crowdfunding for fun, almost. And it encapsulated a lot of what I liked about crypto back in the day. The fun aspect of it. Unfortunately, the fun kind of died. I was, from a personal standpoint, I couldn't immigrate to the United States for various reasons. It's a entirely different podcast. But so I moved to Fiji, of all places. It's a great place to visit. But starting from there was a lot of stuff going around the crypto space at the time. Where, I mean, even Dogecoin, there was this group called Bolong that orchestrated a bunch of pump and dumps around Dogecoin, and it just kind of ruined that atmosphere, I think, of tipping people, giving stuff away, and it kind of changed it. And I'm very happy to see the Dogecoin community was able to move on with that. But to me, when that happened, it kind of just killed it. With NXT, BC Next left. I mean, things still kept pushing forward for the project, and of course, the price went down, and that kind of just kept going down. That kind of depressed me a little bit. I was not in the best financial state, although I didn't, invest more than I could afford to lose. So it was okay. I wasn't like on the streets and starving at the time, but yeah, it just, there wasn't a lot of things to look forward to. I think that's one of the big differences between the bear market then and the bear market now. I could name a lot of things I'm looking forward to in the crypto space now, and back then I couldn't. I remember asking somebody like, what's next for Bitcoin? And, maybe I asked the wrong person, but they said, nothing. It is what it is now. Maybe it just gets more popular. That's it.
Right.
And and there was somebody who said, the block size is getting close to being full. That might be a concern sometime soon. And another guy said, no, I don't think we'll have to care about that. Well, we know that ended up being such a big topic. No, I came back into crypto in 2016 because I was broke. I was absolutely broke, and I need to sell my coins, only to find out they were, I bought Litecoin at $35 and I saw them at $3.
Ouch.
That was painful.
Yeah.
That was painful. No, I did not hold. I mean, I held for that time, but I sold shortly after because I really needed cash. Yeah, I mean, I was disappointed in the space initially, but then I looked into what's actually has been done during the time. Litecoin didn't have a lot of development during the time. Charlie Lee was still in Coinbase, and Litecoin was still not added. So I was like, okay, that's gone. Dogecoin was still around, although the IRC was getting a little bit weird. It didn't have the same spirit anymore. Bitcoin markets was unfortunately dead. at that time. We got resurrected eventually once more people came in. But NXT was interesting because it still had a lot of developments, although the community was definitely fragmented. One thing a lot of people don't know, so the projects like Lisk, Waves, IOTA, NEM, Komodo, all have some connection to NXT. It was really a nice space to be around. I mean, it was essentially like a templated smart contracts kind of platform.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm oversimplifying it, but that's why it attracted just so many people. Okay. But I saw a lot of developments there, and then I saw that, you know, I'm a big open source fan. And when the Linux Foundation had Hyperledger, I was like, okay, you know what, if there's a lot of companies getting into, I mean, not companies, but if there's a lot of interest around this technology, it must be serious. And it was the exact same feeling that I had when the price went up to 1,000, except, you know, the price was going a completely different direction. I said, you know what, I'm looking for a career shift. So I was with web marketing, it just wasn't doing it for me anymore. I mean, I still do it every now and then for some friends, and that's how I actually got into some crypto projects. So with I joined the NXT Foundation because of that. With Hyperledger, I helped out with some of the marketing side as part of the marketing committee, and a bunch of other projects as well. But I just, it wasn't just making me happy. Also from a practical standpoint, I'm trying to immigrate, and I was at the time also. And if your line of work isn't specialized, it's very difficult. Like I mean, web marketing is not, you know, just it's not you need some kind of knowledge to do it properly. But there's so many great web marketers here in Europe, so it wasn't like, you know, a strong argument that I would get a sponsorship or that. Like that was one of the I was actually in this place called Svalbard at the time. It's about 78 degrees north, 3 hours north of Oslo by flight.
Okay, yeah.
Great place to visit again. I went up there because I had a job offer there, but in Europe, in mainland Europe, I couldn't get sponsorship after dropping out of my master's program because my American company went bankrupt. Again, trying to streamline that entire thing, but it's yeah, and you know, I was like, okay, this is an interesting emerging tech. I'm looking for a career change. Why not this? So I did that. That was a risky move. I went all in on it. I actually stopped doing some web marketing minus the stuff that I needed, you know, just to pay the bills. Like I made some websites for friends and things like that. But yeah, so that's how I got into it, and I just kept saying yes to many things. I mean, I'm self-taught with technical stuff. I don't have a computer science degree. I took one computer science class actually, but I walked out of the class because I just didn't like being taught how to code. I can code in BASIC. Completely useless today. I don't know what I can build anymore. I haven't built anything with it in a long time, but it just wasn't. I just didn't like the format of being taught that way. And
no, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I personally, I think university is going to go the way of the dodo. Really, like I think it's quite ridiculous nowadays. The way that these universities work is really quite silly. I mean, in the U.S., for example, you know, you're gonna get what, $100,000 in debt to go to university. Like I signed up for an online university, and you know, it didn't really cost me that much for various reasons, but each course that I signed up for a computer science degree.
Mm-hmm.
And each course that I signed up for was like $900 some odd. And I was signing up for 4 courses for a semester. And I had to take prerequisites. Like I had to take an English writing class. I had to take an intro to statistics class. I had to take a scientific reasoning class, and then an introduction to computer science, which was the only course that I was actually interested in. And, you know, so I'm going through it and I'm reading all these textbooks and I'm doing all this nonsense work, and I'm not learning how to code. I'm not learning anything, right? Like I'm going through the intro to computer science, and I'm learning about, you know, like in the first chapter, the history of computers, and like how like the the first programmable loom was like the first computer because it's like a loom for weaving patterns into fabric by using punch cards. So we can say that it was like, essentially, it was sort of like a computer with memory because of the punch cards. And then they talk about the Luddite revolution because people didn't like that the you know, their work was being automated. And, you know, I'm like, well, that's great, but this is all nonsense. Like,
Yeah.
sure, you know, sure, it's cool to learn about this stuff. So then I kind of gave up on this computer science degree, and I went to Udemy. I looked on YouTube for like, you know, what is the best Python course? And there was like some comparison of different courses for just learning Python, right?
Mhm.
Python is a good place to start because it's like, it's a language that is imperative, right? You can also implement classes, so object-oriented programming, and you can define functions, so it's functional programming, right? You get kind of all the major programming paradigms all in Python. It's neat. It's very concise, right? You don't have to like write 20 lines of code just to declare a variable. So it's a good programming language to learn. So I do some research and I find on Udemy there's like a Python 3 boot camp from zero to hero, right? So I start this course. It costs $24.99 Canadian, $24, right?
It's
And
pretty
then
good.
you immediately start learning how to code, and it holds your hand what you need to install, what you need to do, get Sublime Text, get Anaconda, get this, get that, run how to run a Jupyter notebook, right? All of this stuff step by step, and it starts teaching you about, you know, how to declare variables, how to write strings, and, you know, all of this stuff, how to, you know, and you get into it immediately, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, well, you know, if you're trying to like prototype some project, right? Or you're trying to learn a skill that you can use in a job, either way, right? Do you want to spend 4 years taking mostly, you know, prerequisite courses like an English class, right?
Mhm.
And then learning about the history of computer science? Like, yeah, sure, Boolean gates are cool. Do I need to know how the CPU works, right? CPUs exist,
Yep.
right? They work.
Mhm.
Do I like, it's kind of like, do I want to learn how to design an engine, right, in order to be a mechanic? Sort of,
Yeah.
right? Like, is this really a practical use of my time? And do I need to take an English writing class, right? Like,
Yeah.
so realistically, like, I feel like universities, there's better ways to learn
Mhm.
practical skills. There's way better ways to learn practical skills. And yeah, I can understand how you might have dropped out of your computer science degree because I have the same experience.
Yeah. Oh, I only took one class. I did a business degree, so I finished that. For immigration purposes, it's also very important.
Hmm.
It helps a lot, but that's not the reason why I finished. I finished it because I wanted to, and I was fortunate with the resources to be able to do so. Um, but I agree with you that I think the universities, as we know it today, will become like the way of the dodo.
Hmm.
And I think the reason why it's gotten to this point is because of such a big social pressure,
Hmm.
which is stupid, to go to university. I
Yeah.
mean, there's nothing wrong exactly with what you mentioned to just skip all of the stuff you don't want and just go directly. I mean, if you have the resources to take all of those stuff, then, you know, free market, be my guest. Like if you want to, you know, to take a few courses in a topic that's not at the core of what you're learning, what you aim to learn, but you just want to do it for fun and you have the resources to do that, that's totally your prerogative.
Hmm.
And so I'm completely fine with that still being there, but it's like, I think I'd like to see that get smaller and that only the people who really can, you know, one or afford or in whatever way, not saying like necessarily out of pocket, but also like time and
Mhm.
support from external sources or whatever, then they can do that. But I mean, it doesn't make sense to force people. Like there's such a stigma, and I hate this, that where people look down and it's like, oh, what university did you go to? And it's like, no, I didn't go into any university. I just took some courses online, and I took a vocational course here where we on day one they started teaching us how to code right away. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, I think that should be equally respected. It's just because they didn't go through the paved route and wanted to go on their own way that
Yeah.
they're any less. Um, it's just the way that they chose, and it's very cost effective, as you mentioned with the whole Udemy thing. Um, if you can find if you can find something that works for you,
Well, I mean,
and it's more scalable online, so it makes a
if
lot more sense.
if you can find a course, I don't know exactly how many people I like. If you can find a course that like at least 10,000 other people have taken, and
Exactly.
it has a user rating of 4.5 out of 5, right, or something like that, right? That's a good
Mhm.
sign already, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's
Like,
a Go ahead. Sorry.
no. I just mean like, yeah, I fully agree with you, and I just think that you know
Yeah.
universities, there are these very hierarchical centralized things that people in the blockchain community, right, is like it's not intuitive why anyone in
Mhm.
in this industry would necessarily be aligned with that kind of model, right? Like these very hierarchical centralized structures that are incredibly expensive and traditional.
Mhm.
This is just not what I think we're about.
Yeah, I mean, if they're trying to disrupt that model, then it's something I support. I mean, like I mean, of course, the research that the universities do, that's a completely different topic. But in terms of like the teaching aspect, well, I mean, one thing I like is the whole. So I'm going to be a guest lecturer at the University of Applied Sciences in Vienna,
Mhm.
and that one's more of like a program where, yeah, from day one they just learn blockchain, and it's a it's very direct. Like it's like you come in, you do this, you're
Mhm.
out.
Yeah.
And I like that model, and I'm happy that they're having that as a specific thing. This one is targeted to business people, so it's more of like a business training thing, which I think like a lot of universities should start going to. It's like, yeah, okay, we're gonna have this program. You come in, you just learn this, and you get like a certificate because you might need it sometime. And I
Right.
think that's completely fine. And then they're in competition with exactly the ones that you have on Udemy. And for some people, if they want that personalized attention, then there's that option. But again, it's an option. It's not something that's like required.
Hmm.
And that's how it should go. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the day that it's going to be like that, because
Yeah.
it's really needed. I mean, it's most people in the world don't need to go through an entire take all of these additional prerequisites that they'll
Hmm.
probably forget
Yeah.
after they graduate, or they're just going to half-ass all of those classes anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, that's just the truth of it. So it's unfortunate, but and I'm hoping that that's going to change. Um, but trying to figure out what I was going to around that, but I mean, education is still quite important, and I keep saying that education is important, and I don't equate that at all to saying that, oh, the current systems are important. No, teaching people is still always going to be important. Giving them the resources to learn is always going to be. I really like what the Lambda school, I think that's what they're called, what they're doing. Their business model is very interesting, where it's like you sign up, you only pay after if you get paid,
Yeah.
essentially. And
Hmm.
that's a very fantastic disruptive model. I'd love to see that grow. I asked them actually if they, because I know a lot of people who want to take it, but unfortunately I think it's restricted right now to just Americans.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure if they have it for Canadians as well, but they have it for European Union people. But so I don't qualify, and a lot of people in Asia who could actually really use something like that, uh, you know, could qualify for, don't qualify for, unfortunately. But
Mm,
yeah,
that's a shame. What
that's a
is it
shame. But
called again? Lambda what?
Lambda School,
Lambda school.
yeah, I just sent them a message about it, and they said like, yeah, we're looking into it. But I also understand, it's the I mean, they're a business, right? So they're not going to make as much money if somebody working in a poorer country as they would as somebody in the United States.
Mm.
It's just a fact. But hey, their model is very scalable, and that's the one thing I like about online education. Is it's very scalable. I mean, most of and we see that in the crypto space as well. It's just like, I mean, how many times has has one video of Andreas Antonopoulos been watched? Like, you'll see that number being quite big.
Yep.
Um, that's just phenomenal. And to me, it's still something that I have to swallow. I know it's not that new that one video gets seen by so many people. But if you can kind of like try to visualize it, like if you can imagine just one person talking on
Mm-hmm.
screen, and
Yep.
then hundreds of thousands of people watching, and you try to put that all in like one room, it's kind of crazy if you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite a fantastic thing that we have. And I think there was just trying to tie this back into crypto. There was something that somebody said before about why Satoshi didn't release Bitcoin earlier.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of theories around it, but one thing that somebody said is that it just was the right time. There were a lot of things that were in place, and I don't know if it was planned or not, but in terms of online communication and online collaboration and education, it was a good time in 2009. At least for me, that was also the time that I started looking into online resources more, at the complaint of the people around me saying like, oh, things you read on the internet aren't real. I'm like, it's not that different if somebody decides to click print and puts it on a book.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, but it's there were just a lot of things around the time that were right, I guess. So I can kind of agree with that. I mean, looking back at the history of cryptocurrencies before Bitcoin, well, I guess not technically cryptocurrencies, but digital currencies with some cryptography applied, depending on which one you're looking at. Yeah, it was very interesting, and there were a lot of things that just failed because it wasn't the right time. And I think cryptocurrencies today, it's the right time. So, and I'm hoping to see that help disrupt everything, just including education. If there's a country in the world where you're not allowed to, if you're, if it's a very oppressive country, like let's say they don't let women learn,
Mm-hmm.
and they can't, maybe they can access all the free stuff, but they'd like to access some of the paid stuff. But nobody takes money from that from people from that country, or that country itself blocks payments that are going out. They can't do that to cryptocurrency. This
Right.
child will be able to, if they have the money, they can from their parents or something, they can pay a lecturer anywhere in the world
Mm-hmm.
to teach, or to access that class, or to get special one-on-one training, like so many things that wouldn't be possible otherwise. So it's actually one of the things that I'm going to talk. So I have a presentation in Vienna in about a week. So this is like one of the areas I'll talk about. It's like the benefits of a decentralized ecosystem. It's the way of a truly free market. I believe that the free market is the best way for us to go, at least for the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just a big key to that. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm in this space, and that's why I'm not just I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist. Although I respect Bitcoin maximalists, or
Mm-hmm.
maximalists of any coin to a degree, depending on what coin they're maximalist of. But it's there's so many things that can be used with the technology, and that's what I've been trying to look into. And yeah, okay, it might not be the most efficient. That's one of the biggest criticisms. Like, it's slow, does all of this, but if it's the most viable, why not?
Right. I
And
mean, if it helps the unbanked, if it's a censorship resistant technology, like I spent 12 years in China, and so what I'm primarily interested in this technology for is because I see Bitcoin as a CRDT, right? It's a conflict-free replicated data type. And fundamentally, what Bitcoin is, at the end of the day, it is a pretty solid way for millions and potentially, billions of computers to
Mm-hmm.
all share a consistent view of history, right?
Mm-hmm.
On this day at this time this event took place, right? And
Yep.
that's essentially what a distributed ledger with a consensus mechanism allows to exist, right? It allows for a shared and consistent view of history that is
Right.
censorship resistant. And so, the possibility of doing things like IPFS and having, decentralized indexes of content and adding links, to like universal resource indicators where you can replicate, things like videos and stuff. Having a Web 3.0 that's fully decentralized, and obviously currency is a big part of that. So what I was working on before I got into Bitcoin is I was trying to create a censorship resistant um, messaging and content distribution network, and I was interested in using protocols that were not necessarily censorship resistant, but that if you did censor them, you'd create a tremendous amount of collateral damage to your network. Things like, for example, IMAP, right? Like having end-to-end encrypted messaging over IMAP. But then the problem with that is, you're not necessarily, you're not encrypting the metadata, right?
Mm-hmm.
And from a signals intelligence perspective, you know, having full visibility on the metadata of your social graph, like who you're messaging with, how often, who else you're related to, how those people are interconnected, right? That data is far more valuable than having human beings reading individual messages, right? Like that's far less reliable and far more expensive a way to do intelligence gathering. So um, even if you have an end-to-end encrypted system, you're still right. You're still giving away most of the valuable information. And so then in 2013, after the Edward Snowden revelations came out, I heard about a protocol called BitMessage. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if you ever heard of that.
Yeah,
Um,
I've heard about it, but not in detail.
so BitMessage was really, really cool. I mean, BitMessage was it was basically what you do is you encrypt a message with the intended recipient's public key, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
write a message, you encrypt it with the person's public key, and then only they have the private key necessary to decrypt it. But
Mm-hmm.
then you upload this encrypted message to a blockchain essentially
Mm-hmm.
of messages. So everybody's uploading all the messages and everybody's downloading all the messages. So all the messages are being replicated, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But no man in the middle, right? Be it the ISP or whoever, has any idea, because there's no server admin, there's no central server, there's no
Mm-hmm.
way that you can have any idea who is corresponding with who, right? Because everybody, like when you upload a message, everybody downloads it and everybody re-uploads it and everybody's replicating it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
in the bit message protocol, you've completely obfuscated the metadata, right? Like I suppose a state level actor that has full visibility across the entire network could ascertain who was the first person to upload a message,
Mm-hmm.
but they would have no idea who the message was intended for because everybody's downloading it,
Right.
and they would have no idea about like who replied to the message, right?
Mm-hmm.
um, so you could have pretty secure communications on this protocol. The problem with BitMessage, which can't really be solved is kind of like the block times. So doing a round trip on a message would take like 4 minutes or something like that, right? So you'd send a message, and then it would take maybe two or it would take a few minutes for the person to receive the message. And then assuming that they're sat at their computer waiting for a message and they immediately reply, it would take another few minutes to receive a response, right? So forget about doing anything like instant messaging. And then the other problem was, in order to prevent spam on this network, in order to prevent someone from just flooding the network with all kinds of nonsense, they had implemented a proof of work scheme, right? So, like, let's say you wanted to attach a 1 megabyte image to your message and send that, you'd have to do like 15 minutes worth of proof of work on your computer to upload. Like, so this was basically, it was like 1995 speeds, right? It was just, it was not a useful protocol. And then the other issues, right? Obviously, they dealt with scaling issues. Like, they talked about potentially sharding the network so that everybody would be replicating like a certain percentage of all the messages and whatever. But I mean, they never really had a bulletproof roadmap for scalability. So, I mean, the community kind of abandoned this protocol. It was cool, right? Like, from a security perspective, that's a sledgehammer. That is the most secure you can possibly imagine, right? There's no metadata and everything is encrypted completely end to end, right? So it was cool. It was cool. And I have fond memories of the BitMessage protocol. But, you know, from a usability perspective, right? Like, it's like the convenience of like, it's like the trade-off between convenience and security, right? Like, there's not a lot of people that would actually want to use even a very pretty, a very ready for prime time BitMessage client. You couldn't get a network effect on top of BitMessage. But now we have all kinds of new protocols that are cool. And so, you know, that's the stuff that I'm interested in. So when I kind of learned about Bitcoin, you know, I thought it was cool, but for me, it's just the fintech component, right? Like, for me, this entire ecosystem goes way deeper than just money, right? It's a new internet. It's Web 3.0. It's a completely decentralized, censorship resistant, distributed internet that's just way more powerful than just money, you know? That's why I'm interested in it.
Yeah, I mean, I was a big fan of SETI. So it was essentially a distributed network. You know, people contributing their power together. It just had a very profound image for me about like all of these computers around the world. You know, everything from like a small Raspberry Pi to large computing devices contributing to a single network. And because it was non-financial, you know, it's like somebody holding up a Raspberry Pi. Yeah, okay, that pales into the contribution of like maybe somebody having an entire server rack of CPUs, like just using that power. I don't know if somebody actually did, but I'm guessing someone actually did if they had the time and resources. It was just interesting image. And so when I started coming into Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general, I saw that again, but on a larger scale where it was much bigger. I mean, you know, with SETI, yeah, okay, it's a distributed network, but it's, you know, all controlled by SETI, which was okay. I mean, they were clear about it. It's not like they tried to lie. Oh, you have power too. It's like, no, we do, but you're contributing to us, so thank you. Like, oh, okay. You know, they're honest about that. But with a decentralized ecosystem, it just really, takes things a whole new level. I mean, it's an entirely new paradigm where well, I'm sorry, it's not entirely new. It's a new it's an old paradigm applied to an area where it wasn't kind of available yet.
Hmm.
I mean, the internet it's kind of distributed. I mean, nobody owns it, but it's still like
That's not true. Somebody does own the internet.
sorry.
Somebody does own the internet. It's a company in California called ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned
Ah,
Names and Numbers.
right. Yeah. So
They,
with a DNS system, right?
yeah,
Yes.
they control the
Yes.
DNS hierarchy. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. No, I agree with that one.
So in theory,
I
they
got
can turn
something.
off the internet. I don't think they would, but they could.
Yeah.
Which is
Nobody really. I mean, I don't know the IP address for the IP addresses for the websites I'd like to go to directly. So
mhm.
yeah. I mean, some internet services would still survive, but yeah, for the most part, a lot of people wouldn't be able to access the things that they would normally want to access. So yeah, no, that's a good point. But that's why I like the decentralized DNS stuff. I think Namecoin started it, and then actually
Yep.
NXT and Ardor also have it, and then now so many different protocols have many different kind of systems around it. And I like it. I'm looking forward to that actually
Mhm.
being more of a thing. I'd
Yep.
like to see like I actually thought about creating a browser until we found out what one, I have no idea how to do that. Two, it's a lot of work and a lot of people need to be involved. Hoping the Brave browser maybe tries to integrate something like that where like somebody can change sort of it's like NXT colon slash slash or ETH colon slash slash or whatever that they want. They have the option to do whatever they want,
Mhm.
which DNS system they want to read from. But anyway, so my point about that was like, yeah, I mean, there's many centralized aspects around around the internet, as you mentioned with ICANN. I forgot about that, so thanks for bringing that up.
Mhm.
And but we could never, people couldn't fathom the idea of I mean, today I bought something in cash. I think I bought a small bottle of Kofolac, a soda here in the Czech Republic.
Mhm.
It's really good to try.
Mhm.
It's it. I bought that with cash. They didn't know who I was. They didn't care.
Right.
And yeah, okay. There's a receipt that says it was sold. But I have the bottle. I don't even remember the name of the store. I just like walked into it and bought it.
Right.
But that's not the case when you do that on the internet. And this until cryptocurrencies came around.
Mhm.
There were always these payment processors, always the middleman, as you mentioned. So it was always kind of like handheld. There's always somebody like connecting this to there, this to there. So it was just about taking that paradigm of everyday life of being able to barter. I love trading.
Mhm.
I mean, it's efficient, right? I mean, it's like if I have to sell this to get money to buy that, like that just adds another process in. But if I can like just do a trade, I'd love that. And yeah, and doing it online was just you couldn't think that.
Right.
Most people could. I never thought that could happen. So that's one thing that really interested me. But I think you mentioned also about having this whole decentralized ecosystem and having cryptocurrency is a very important aspect of it. I completely agree. You can't have a full decentralized ecosystem without decentralized digital peer-to-peer cash.
Mhm.
I mean, you can have aspects of a decentralized ecosystem, but to really scale that up into where many people in the world are involved, you need to have commerce. You need to
Mhm.
have all of these other things. I mean, there's hobbyists who help each other out, and that's great. That's great. I love that. But it's like you're not going to get far with that. You're not going to get so many people willing to dedicate so much of their time for free or for
Mhm.
just for knowledge.
Right.
Um, I did that. I sacrificed quite a lot to just, as I mentioned, I don't have a technical background. So for me, my learning
Mhm.
was helping and doing. So I volunteered a lot. Got paid, below whatever standard it was, but in exchange, I got knowledge, and I think that's quite valuable for me. But not everybody else is able to make that sacrifice. Not everybody else is able to make that decision. So there has to be some kind of commerce involved,
Mhm.
and you can only have that again with digital peer-to-peer cash.
Right.
So otherwise, you're just bringing another third party in, which actually I will say it's actually okay to have if there's a third party involved, but there should always be the option that there is no third party involved.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, again, if it's consensual, right? I'm in favor of all consensual arrangements.
Absolutely, yeah,
Why not? I mean,
yeah,
as long as everybody is a willing participant. Um,
yep,
but the thing is, as it stands at the moment, um,
They don't
nobody's
have
really
that
being given, yeah, nobody's given a choice, right?
option. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, I like that. I like to cook, and but I like also that I have the option to go to a restaurant or to
Hmm.
buy, something ready made.
Hmm.
Um, and but that's delegated trust. We do that every day. We're human beings. We end up trusting other human beings.
Hmm.
Um, there's some risk if they break that trust. Of course, like if I got poisoned on my food, yeah, I can sue the company that put it in. If there's rat poison in there, yeah, totally. But um, we always have these options. But yeah, online we just don't have that option. And cryptocurrencies is giving us all these options.
Hmm.
Um, and so I look forward to seeing that grow. Like in education, there's a project by some of my friends, and it's called Odom, and so they're doing that for education. And I mean, there's a lot of projects around there as well. I'm just blanking on the names right now. I usually try to bring up another one that isn't from my friends, just to make it clear that I'm not shilling anything here.
Right.
But it's also nice actually. I know a lot of speaking of just competition, it's like a lot of the people don't like the idea of many different cryptocurrencies, but I think that that's the best aspect of it. I mean, Satoshi released the code under the MIT license. If
Yeah.
Satoshi himself, themselves, whatever you want to, say to that person is, but I'm going to say himself because he
Hmm.
identified as one person.
Hmm.
Satoshi himself released it under that license initially. That
Hmm.
means that he was, aware that it could be copied, that not only the people could see the source code, but it can be copied and somebody could make an exact same thing.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that that's again going back to options and freedom. I think that if we were forced to use Bitcoin, it would be the same mistake that we're seeing right now. That we don't have the choice. We have to use that third party or another third party, and like, great, we have a choice of two third parties that do the exact same thing that just
Hmm.
maybe compete on price or a nice GUI or something like that. But now we have the option of using so many different kinds of currencies, and yeah, some are maybe not going to be around for very long and not worth anything, but that's our option. That's our choice between the two parties. Do I send it? Does this person accept it in exchange for the goods or services that are being provided? um, and yeah, it's just a great freedom that cryptocurrencies give, additional options. And um, I was actually starting a company. It's called Altreon. This guy named JJ and Matt, um, and a few others. It's too many to mention, but yeah, we were trying to create a wallet that was focused on user freedom, just because we didn't see that there was one out there. I mean, the core clients are great, but it's just not that convenient. Unfortunately, it's have to put that project on hold because lack of funding and teams issues and many other things, and also a lot of stuff that I made a mistake on. But no, it's I see a lot of unfortunately lack of options in the cryptocurrency space today. In
Hmm.
term not in terms of the choice of which coin, of course that's there, but um, a lot of the, like I said, with the core clients, like you get a lot of freedom. Like you get, if you download the entire blockchain, like you have only yourself to trust. You can check, to make sure nobody's cheating or anything. You can do a lot of things on yourself. But if you use a third party wallet that stores your private key, then it's like that and doesn't even give it to you.
Hmm.
That's not good. I mean, there are some, of course, there's some wallets out there that it's not custodial as well, and that's great. But then they restrict some of the features in terms of uh, you either usability because they want to make money on it, or again, it's fine if there was an option to not. Um, Among other things, like a funny thing, I want to bring this up because now that our project's on hold, but I really want to see this feature come out, or
Hmm.
rather really get implemented. There's really not enough wallets that have an address book feature. Like, what in the world is going on?
Yeah.
Even the Bitcoin core client has a freaking address book.
Yeah. Seems pretty basic.
It's pretty basic. And it's just like, I mean, some wallets have that, but not all do. And I'm just like, all should have that. That's such a basic feature.
Yeah, you'd think so. You'd
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
so.
But Yeah. So I mean, that's the other thing, right? So we talked about education, and that's very important, but the usability aspect also. I mean, you mentioned with Bitmessage, it couldn't get the network effect,
Hmm.
and the same thing that we're going to have with cryptocurrency. It's like if if one person can't easily show to another person what it's all about, then it's not going to achieve the full network effect. I mean, there's going to be the people who be like, "Oh yeah, tell me a bit more, please," and then
Hmm.
you know, then it's okay. But until that it becomes that easy to show. I mean, yeah, okay, I can tip you and stuff like that. Yeah, man, yeah, you can do that with regular cash too. I mean, yeah, there's all these other benefits of using cryptocurrency as opposed to fiat money. But
Hmm.
again, not an easy thing to convey to somebody. So that's one thing that we'll still need to have. I don't know exactly how that'll look like. I'm not that uh, I don't have that much of a foresight on exactly what will work, but I'm looking forward to when that happens because
Hmm.
we sincerely need that.
Right. So tell me a little bit more about Altria.
Yeah. So well, it's on hold now, but it's a cryptocurrency dashboard and
Hmm.
also blockchain dashboard or any DLT really. So it had two sides to it. One for organizational use, basically, anybody forking any project, either just for experimentation purposes, like, or if they're running their own private testnet, for example,
Hmm.
and whatever they're using doesn't have a GUI, they can use ours. It'll have like templated graphical features, so that if like sending a message over the blockchain, like, yeah, you need to connect API and stuff like that, do a pull request, so that if it's a platform we don't actually support yet, but overall that way they can get an easy user interface just to like test around with people, because otherwise then the people only testing their software will be people who are developers, or people who really really know what they're doing. um, but also from the cryptocurrency side, it's just that, yeah, it supports user freedom, um, giving users choices where they run. So it's the same concept that we talked about. Like, for example, I'm not going to say their name, but there's one wallet provider that um, provides multi-sig addresses.
Hmm.
And what they actually do is that they hold one of the keys to the multi-sig address. And so what happens is that they take a significant chunk of any transactions that are outgoing. And it's okay, but if they had that option, I mean, what if three of us decide to get a shared wallet, and it's just the three of us, so we maintain all of our three private keys, and we keep them safe. um, we don't want a fourth person in, we just want to have a multi-sig. um, but if they use this wallet, then it's like they get a lot of fees attributed to them. And I mean, again, I'm fine with a third party doing that, but at the moment, there are not many options for that. So we wanted to have the option. I think I forgot the name of the wallet. There's one that gives us for free now, but it's good. We wanted to have it where, like, okay, do you want us to keep one of the keys to add additional security for you guys in case one of you loses the key? We can still do like a 3 or 4 thing, so 2 of you and then us. Then we'll charge on that. But if they don't want that, then they can keep everything themselves, and then they just use their GUI, and that's it.
Hmm.
Our main monetization was just going to be primarily around premium features around it, like JJ, one of the co-founders, is using with the inheritance advisory, just helping families that receive the cryptocurrencies understand what it's actually all about, and then give them a helping hand essentially. He's working on that now, so on his own. So right now for me, I'm actually, this is an interesting time. So this is the first time I'm going to say it publicly. I took on a role of chief technical officer for this company called Consortio Group, based in Switzerland.
Hmm.
Um, this is the first time I'm mentioning it publicly, so I told them that I would be saying it on your show. Um, yeah, I mean, it's just an unfortunate scenario with regards to my startup, but it's not dead for sure. It's still just a project, just on hold. But I wouldn't, to be honest, I wouldn't mind to see somebody else kind of achieve what I wanted to do. Altreon to me was not a project to, fill my bank account.
Hmm.
It was a project that, okay, yeah, to give me a living wage, but also it was much more, it was a passion project. It was something that I've seen in this space. I mean, I made a lot of sacrifices in this space, and I will continue to do so, because yeah, I think it will just really benefit the world in so many different ways.
I agree.
Many topics that we talked about today, and many more. So yeah.
So I mean, why do you think you're so motivated to to incur all of these personal sacrifices that you've incurred for participating in this project of distributed systems? I mean, what keeps you going in this industry?
Oh, well, I'm just gonna be completely honest. There's many things to it. One is because it's fun. I love astronomy, and one of the reasons why I love astronomy is because you can actually ask somebody who knows astronomy very well and ask them, "Hey, what's going on with this?" And they'll just say, "We have no idea," and that's a completely valid answer. And we'll have that for a long time with astronomy, but with distributed systems, it's like it has so many aspects to it. It's not just with the decentralized ecosystem, it's not just technology, it's also society and how they're going to interact with that. That's just really not seen at this scale, at this level of connectivity before. And to me, that's just such a fantastic area to be around. And from my experience, being involved was the best learning experience for me. And I've learned that with emerging technologies. Like I remember when I was brought up university, I can admit this publicly now. I intentionally made a mistake in one of my reports just to see if my professor actually knew it. Most of the time, the university I went to was actually pretty good, but I wrote about web marketing when there wasn't a lot of web marketing stuff going around yet. At least at the stronger level of search engine optimization, yeah, they didn't catch that at all. And that's when I decided to be in that, because that's at the forefront, and that's like, I'm gonna learn more about it, and I can only learn more if I'm actually there. So that's the thing with cryptocurrency. If I'm not there working around this space with distributed decentralized ecosystems, so blockchain, DLT, and anything around there, if I'm not working that, I'm not gonna be able to catch up. I'm always gonna be the one hearing about it. But I want to be part of the people finding stuff out, part of the group of people who are building stuff on it. Mm-hmm. So that's one side, and the other side is, I said it already with the immigration part. I mean, specialization is key. I mean, I think that alone isn't enough of a reason. So the first one that I mentioned is the reason, but this, I'll admit, it's also still a factor. Mm-hmm. It's helped me quite a lot. I'm a Philippine citizen, mm-hmm. trying to immigrate right now in Europe, and it's generally don't get treated well for that in mm-hmm. terms of the immigration process. I mean, it's I've had a lot of immigration issues over the past 9 years now, but last year was quite tough, and these are just things that most people don't have to go through. So I look forward very much to not having to deal with this and just focus on work. And I feel like this area it's helping me out quite a lot. So yeah, that's that. that's why I'm in this space. What about you?
Well, like I said, I mean, I just when I was in China, I felt like there was a lot of very obvious problems that were being caused in that mm-hmm. society.
Yep.
From the fact that there's no freedom of expression, right? The government controls all of the media outlets, and the government controls everything on the internet, right? And mm-hmm. it's extreme censorship, right? Like, so a few years ago there was this picture of Xi Jinping, who is the current president of China, and he's also the general secretary of the Communist Party. So he's the overall leader of China. And there was this picture of Xi Jinping next to Barack Obama. And Barack mm-hmm. Obama is a little bit taller than Xi Jinping, and Xi Jinping is fatter than Barack Obama. And so some people noticed a similarity between a picture of Winnie the Pooh next to Tigger.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people started comparing Xi Jinping to Winnie the Pooh.
Mm-hmm.
So as a result, the Chinese government banned Winnie the Pooh on the internet,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's kind of an right, like, because Xi Jinping did not like being compared to Winnie the Pooh,
Mm.
right? And that's I
Yeah.
think really childish and immature and quite insecure, right? Like a teenage
Yeah.
girl, and and also, that's almost kind of a harmless form of censorship. Like nobody got hurt, but when it comes to real issues, right? Like when you talk about things like, for example, organ trafficking in state-run hospitals, or the fact that they currently have, almost a million Uyghur Muslims in detention centers and internment camps in Xinjiang Autonomous Region, and all kinds of real issues that I feel like Chinese people deserve to know about these things, right? And freedom of expression is key to having a prosperous society, right? Without freedom of expression, there's no way to challenge the authority, and there's no reason necessarily for the authority to take a look in the mirror and really consider, the ramifications of their actions, right? Like when you don't have freedom of expression, it mostly just accelerates Kool-Aid drinking, right? So it makes people kind of not really look at anything that they need to look at, or look at themselves in the mirror, and it doesn't lead to good outcomes, right? It doesn't lead to good outcomes. And what we can observe in communist China is that since Xi Jinping took over, he started an anti-corruption campaign, because that was the number one complaint of the Chinese people was, oh yeah, there's too much corruption in the Chinese government. So just by coincidence, all of Xi Jinping's enemies got purged from the Communist Party. And, very recently there was a vote to remove term limits. So one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that happened after Chairman Mao is the Chinese government understood, we should not allow a cult of personality. We should not allow one person to gain too much power. And one of the controls that we should put in place is to have term limits, so that one leader of the country can only be the leader for a maximum of 10 years, and there is a mandatory retirement age of 68. And both of these limits were removed, so that Xi Jinping can now be the leader of China for as
Mm-hmm.
long as he wants. And he hasn't named a successor. And so, this anti-corruption campaign, basically, like, it would appear that China is actually moving backwards.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's important that 1.4 billion people on planet Earth have freedom of expression and freedom to challenge ideas, right? Not necessarily do violence, but to have free speech, right? And this is not just a China issue. There's similar censorship issues all over the Middle East. And now we can see that Russia is trying to create a sovereign internet. And there's all of these, kind of major issues going on. And I feel like the answer, or at least a big part of the answer to many of these major human rights concerns are distributed censorship resistant systems, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
I agree. I think I mean this is just one of the many areas, right, that we talked about so far. Um, yeah, if you censor people's voices, that's again infringement on their freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Um, people are allowed to tell each other to shut up and that their opinions are wrong, and that's
Mm-hmm.
fine. But it's like if they're actively telling, like, forcing people to not let their voices be heard. Uh, you know, you mentioned insecurity of people's power. I mean, for them, it's more like a fear. It's because they know that if it comes out, that their power will be gone.
Right.
There's an interesting book that I read. It was called The Dictator's Handbook, and it showed how, a lot of, essentially, like, the power struggle both in democracies and dictatorships are pretty similar to each other. It's just that how they manifest themselves are a little bit different in both sides, but actually quite a lot of similarities, interestingly. Um, yeah, it's pretty well known. It's like, if you control information sharing, it's I think in the book, it's been a while since I read the book, so I don't remember the full terminology. So please pardon that, but it's like, yeah, if you have access to the gold, if you have access to the resources, and it's like, you can easily, and you can shut people up, and you can keep that away from them, then you have the power over them. Then they'll just keep, like, chasing the carrot because you hold the stick.
Right.
And they want to keep that power. But the sad part, maybe, I have a very negative view on humanity, is that, I mean, once the powers that be, like, get removed, the establishment, or whatever, people want to call them, it's like, I just feel that another one is going to come back up, because we as humans just haven't reached that point yet of, being, I don't know if we'll ever reach that point of being able to, stop this from happening again, but maybe it's within our nature to continuously make that mistake. Who knows, it might just be part of the entire process, but yeah, I'm unfortunately quite negative on that, but I would be very happy to be wrong. Trust me, I would love to be wrong and see, like, okay, all of the oppressive powers, or any of these, like, anything that's contributed to the censorship of anything, in the context of what we spoke, get removed, that they will never come back up again. And I like that. I mean, one thing I love about cryptocurrency, right? And actually, this is one of the things I don't, not necessarily like to get in fights in, but I like to point out. Some people are saying, like, oh, can banks even be allowed to buy Bitcoin? Can government officials that we don't like be allowed to buy Bitcoin? It's like, guess what? Yeah, they can. That's the point of the entire thing. If you can tell them not to buy that, if you can force them to not buy it, that means they can do the exact same thing to you at some point in time.
Right.
But that's the amazing thing about that. With cryptocurrency, like, you can hate two people, you can hate their guts, and they can both still use cryptocurrency, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that is the beauty of it. That is the beauty of censorship resistant systems. And what we can also observe, just from the kind of the concept of decentralization, right? So what we can see is that whenever you centralize power, with, like, even in a democracy where you have first past the post systems, right, that allow for the largest minority to gain a majority control of a Congress or a House of Commons or whatever, right? Where let's say a political party with 35 or 40% of the popular vote, because that is the largest minority in each riding, they end up getting a majority share of the seats in a government, right? So they end up getting the majority of the representative seats in this government. So you have one party with effectively all of the control, or the controlling interest, let's say, in the government, right? And then there's another system, which is proportional representation, right? Which is where seats are allocated essentially, and it's a little bit more complex than this. There's a lot of mechanisms involved, but essentially the seats are allocated based on the percentage of the voter support that you got. So if you have, let's say, 35% of the votes, you get 35% of the seats, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what ends up happening in countries that have proportional representation is you always have coalition governments, right? You never have one party with a majority of the control of the government.
Mm-hmm.
And what we can also observe, right, in countries that have proportional representation, right, is that they're all at the top of the UN Happiness Index,
Mm-hmm.
right? They have some of the highest GDP per capita. They have some of the lowest corruption. They have the longest lifespans. They're the healthiest. They're the happiest, and they're the wealthiest people on
Mm-hmm.
Earth, right? So whenever you disintermediate and you decentralize power structures, it appears that people benefit from this, right?
Absolutely. And
Just as a
people
proof of
feel that,
concept.
yeah, and people feel that their votes count more. I mean,
Mhm.
um, I, when I was at the States as a student and eventually working there, I was surprised that um, people's votes aren't equal in a country that prides itself on freedom and democracy. They sure don't have that.
No, they don't.
Um,
Not at all.
in the, I remember having a talk. One of my best friends, he's Republic. He's a like very adamantly Republican, and I was in Seattle, in Washington State, which has been consistently Democrat for the longest time. And he was talking about politics, and I just, he was very impassioned. I mean, I'm not American, so I didn't want to get into that. I'm like, okay, you guys can figure that stuff out for yourselves. I have my own thoughts, but I'm not. I shouldn't influence your country's politics.
Hmm.
And but I just looked at him and was like, dude, I'm sorry, but all of this you're saying, it's not going to matter because your voice just simply isn't going to be heard.
Hmm.
Your vote isn't going to count for anything. I mean, I didn't want to. I mean, okay, there's like arguments if you can get enough, but uh, from a practical standpoint, right? That all of these people have these opinions, and it's like, no, a person's vote in Ohio mattered more
Yeah.
than a person in Washington State. Um, in the Senate, somebody whose vote in Rhode Island mattered more than Washington State. And I just said, like, how can you guys let this happen? And
Hmm.
then he went over the history and stuff. So I was like, okay, that kind of made sense back in the day, but clearly that doesn't work anymore today. And
Hmm.
as you mentioned, it's like, with with more coalition governments and many different parties under one system, it's like people, they're more accountable to their voters. um, People can have more differing opinions, and that's fantastic. It's like, you're not Republican or Democrat. You're instead like this. You can say like, okay, you know what? In this issue, I'm this, and that issue, I'm that, and that's how it's supposed to be, right? I mean,
Right.
like I have, for example, I don't know what my political stance is, but I don't plan to ever have one because I just like to take case issues on a case by case basis, and then I'll see like, okay, I feel like this on that, and it's like that's how it should be. And yeah, I think that's how people will be happier when they're not cornered into somewhere. And in a way, that's almost like censorship, right? It's like if you have to vote for this politician because they have these views, even if you disagree with them very strongly on this, and you have no other option because the other option is the complete no. Is your voice being heard? No, it's not. It's not.
Well, the interesting thing about this technology that that you and I are so passionate about, right? When we talk about decentralized censorship resistant systems, right? Like
Mhm.
there are essentially three cornerstones of a civilization, right? If you control these three things, you control the civilization, right? The
Mhm.
three things include money,
Mhm.
media, and military. It's the three M's.
Yep.
If you control the money and the media and the military, you own the country or the civilization, right?
Yep.
If you do not control the money and the military and the media, you do not control the country, right? So
Yep.
if we observe, right, something like, for example, IPFS that I'm pretty excited about, that
Mhm.
seems like a pretty solid basis for a decentralized media,
Mhm.
right? And then if we look at something like, for example, Bitcoin, which has some scalability issues, but it's a solid proof of concept, right?
Yep.
Like Ethereum 2.0 with Casper and sharding, right? And then Mimblewimble and Lightning Network, and there's all kinds. But essentially, if you have a decentralized currency and you have a decentralized media,
Mm-hmm.
right? Already, that's 2 out of 3, right?
Yep.
So I feel like this technology um, has the promise to kind of disintermediate a lot of these elite, this elite ruling class, and make them completely irrelevant, right?
Yep.
And then so at some point, if you have a truly free press, a truly free media, not a corporate media with all kinds of business interests, but just a free press
Mm-hmm.
comprised of people saying whatever they think, and then you have certain consensus mechanisms for establishing verifiable truth, and you can kind of allow the better or the more verifiable content to rise to the top of this censorship resistant content distribution network.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a decentralized currency, right? Like if the
Mm-hmm.
government can't control the money supply, that's a big problem,
Yep.
obviously, right? That's a big problem for them, not necessarily for the people, but for the centralized government that's corrupt. If they cannot control the money supply, or if they can print dollars but nobody gives a shit about the dollars that they're printing, right? That's a
Mm-hmm.
major step towards completely disintermediating this authority, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if there's a censorship resistant decentralized media and a censorship resistant decentralized currency, that's kind of a game changer.
Yeah.
These are technologies that could actually bring about a real democracy.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, the democracies that we're seeing around the world doesn't feel like actual democracies. For not, not saying everywhere, but in a lot of places. Um, yeah, absolutely, I agree 100%. It's like if they control the money, media, and the military, they can control the country, and they can do whatever they want, essentially. Um, they just try to play nice eventually. I mean, there's a lot of power struggles in play, of course, but yeah, if you have a firm control over that, you have more power than anybody else
mhm,
within that country. Um, I think also we have with cryptocurrencies, we have the power to uh, maybe not really disintermediate the military, but more so make them more accountable.
yep.
One thing I like is that we have all of these privacy mechanisms around various cryptocurrencies, and very interested to seeing where it will go. But if if I had the option, and I mean, I pay taxes in a lot of places I go to because one, I'm not a citizen, so for me, I almost see it as like rent to be in that country. Um, but if I had a choice, any money that goes to the military, I'd like that to be on a publicly verifiable platform
Mhm,
where they cannot hide it and they have to show whenever they're spending. And okay, maybe there's a feature about anonymization or something if there's something needed, but then we'll see them try it and then we'll
yeah.
demand an explanation. I
Yeah.
understand that there are some expenses that might have to be, for confidential reasons not be seen, but we'd like a reason. And if they just say confidential, and if they do it too many times, then the people will actually be like, hey, no, you can't do that. Maybe if you have like 1% of your budget be under that system, fine, but 99%, we have to be able to see what you're doing. If
Right.
you're spending recklessly,
No,
it's,
I mean, I completely agree with you that financial accountability and transparency is a key here. And I mean,
yep.
here's the thing about, in the case of the US military, right, for
Mm-hmm.
example, where they have a budget, north of $750 billion. And that's just the budget that we know about, not including whatever discretionary funds they have access to. And also the cost of caring for veterans that come home from wars, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, like this country spends a ridiculous amount of money on defense, right? And what's interesting is it's not immediately obvious to me that they actually have better military capabilities necessarily than other countries. They might, but here's the thing. I'll give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a plane, a fighter jet that they have, which is the F-22 Raptor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now the F-22 Raptor costs $350 million. That's how much it
That's
costs.
a lot of money.
Here's the thing. The Russians, they have a fighter jet.
Mm-hmm.
And fighter jets are going the way of the dodo because everything's going to become unmanned, right? But
Yep.
nevertheless, it's just an example, right?
Yep.
So the Russians have a fighter jet called the Su-35. And
Mm-hmm.
the Su-35 has the same operational capabilities as the F-22, right? It can fly just as fast. It can fly just as far. It can carry the same missile payload. It has the same kind of Gatling gun or cannon on board. It's actually more maneuverable because the Su-35 has like a vectored exhaust system where they can actually point the exhaust from the jet engines in different directions. So it's actually more maneuverable than the F-22.
Mm-hmm.
It has essentially the same operational capabilities. The one thing that you can say about the F-22 is that it's supposedly a stealth fighter, right? Because it has supposedly the radar cross-section of a bumblebee.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Wow.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing. If you observe a bumblebee on your radar screen coming at you at Mach 2, right, twice the speed of sound, at 60,000 feet in a straight line, right, it's probably not a bumblebee,
Yep.
obviously, right?
Yeah.
So basically this F-22 Raptor costs $350 million, and the Su-35, which is its Russian equivalent, it starts at 50 million, and the loaded one with like all the bells and whistles costs 75.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So basically, for the price of one F-22 Raptor, you could buy 5 equivalent planes for the same price from the Russians. Right? Now,
Yeah.
if your enemy is spending 5 times less than you, but maybe they have the same operational capabilities that you have, right? That's not like an obvious strategy for success here,
Yeah.
right? So when we're talking about things like the F-22 Raptor, like that's just spitting in the face of the American taxpayer.
Yeah.
That's all that is. That's just right, the military industrial complex stealing money
Yep.
from the American government because of corruption, right? That's all that is, right? And again, both of these planes are complete nonsense, right? Because really, like, you can use Tomahawk missiles, which have roughly the same range, right?
Mm-hmm.
A cruise missile that carries 1,000 pounds of high grade explosives, right?
Mm-hmm.
It flies to a place and then it blows up, and you don't care, right? A cruise, one of like the most expensive American, like the Tomahawk, costs $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So for the price of one jet fighter, one F-22, you can buy 350 Tomahawk cruise missiles. Right? So it like.
No,
And
I mean,
I bet you the Russians have an equivalent to the Tomahawk cruise missile that costs a fifth, right?
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised about that either. So essentially, like when we talk about, like you said, financial accountability in the military,
Yeah.
like it's a huge problem. Like these people are not financially accountable. They're just spending ridiculous amounts of money on nonsense, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know how much an Abrams tank costs? It cost
I'm
$70
guessing.
million.
Okay, that's more than what I would have guessed. Wow.
It cost $70 million to have an Abrams tank, to buy one Abrams tank. And what do you do with an Abrams tank?
Oh my goodness.
What is the use case in modern warfare for an Abrams tank? Right?
Yeah.
Like this is nonsense. This is absolute nonsense. And beyond that, right, when we talk about a decentralized media, here's the thing. Like if you go back and you read Sun Tzu's Art of War or Sun Tzu Lifa, right, like the method of force, right, the art of conflict, essentially. One of the things that he talks about is moral authority or moral legitimacy, right? If you don't have moral legitimacy, you won't get the support of your people and you won't get the support of your soldiers, right? Eventually, this is what, like, one of the major things that will cause you to lose a war. Let's look at what happened in Vietnam. The Vietnamese never won any single battle against the US on the ground. They never won any battles. They never won any, like even the Tet Offensive, which was this big giant surprise attack. They took some ground, but basically, and then they lost it because then they just started assassinating a bunch of civilians for no reason. And the Vietnamese people, they were unable to recruit more, like reinforcements.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, the U.S. people turned against the U.S. military, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the U.S. lost the Vietnam War in the U.S. because the American people didn't support it, right? After the
Yep.
Gulf of Tonkin and a bunch of nonsense propaganda, 80% of the American populace was in favor of the Vietnam War, right?
Mm-hmm.
After they saw a bunch of nasty shit on TV, the popular support for the war waned, and that's
Mm-hmm.
basically why the U.S. had to pull out of Vietnam, right?
Yep.
So if you control the money and the media, the military is going to have a pretty hard time if they're doing shit that's morally illegitimate.
Yep.
Right? If the military is aligned with the moral views of the people that they're defending, right?
Yeah.
Then they will have a much easier time winning any kind of engagement or conflict. But it's very important to decentralize media and money, I think, right?
Absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
that's true democracy.
Absolutely. And just to bring up another country, just so that it's not just mostly in the United States. In the Philippines, like one of the biggest newspapers is run by the government. It's created by the government. It was supposed
Yep.
to be created, like the Philippine Star. It says like, oh yeah, no, create this newspaper. It's gonna be government run so that it's fully honest. Wonderful. It's magnificently corrupt. I lacked an adjective to say to describe how corrupt that country is. There is no accountability. I mean, I there's stories every time of corruption so much that it's actually quite normal. It doesn't even make the news. Like it's the scandals I see in the United States or any other country. See that happen in the Philippines. It's like page 17. It's like nothing. It's
Yeah.
normal. And I think a lot of the developing nations would really benefit from it. I mean, obviously, like we'd see that benefit in large countries also, but like in countries like the Philippines, like although the infrastructure needs to get up to speed by a lot right now, but in terms of what this technology can bring, definitely. Uh, I agree on all those three that you mentioned. There's another one also that the Dictator's Handbook kind of mentioned also. It's like the lineage of where the power goes to.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it depends, are you going to keep the power or not? And that's exactly the problem, as you mentioned in China, where it's like this person is going to have the power for such a long time, and it's like, okay, then the power keeps going and going and going there and stays there because they're actually able to hold on to it.
Yeah.
And yeah, because they're able to control the media, they're able to control the money and all of this, they're able to do that. And that's exactly how democracies or democracies that we see them can easily go to that. Like a lot of people in countries that say they're democracies or might actually be democracies, they say, oh, that's never going to happen here. It actually can, and it could. All of the systems are in place for that, exactly that to happen. And like that doesn't just happen.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, fine, culture can play a little bit part of it, but there's a reason why dictatorships even start in countries that are fully democratic. It's like there's a reason why dictatorship started in the Philippines when it used to be like number 3 in Asia. I lived in Fiji also, and there was like a dictatorship there when I was living there. That was very interesting, although Fiji, so it's beautiful, but
yeah,
definitely could feel it. Yeah, it's just and exactly why that I said that there's such a big social aspect to this with the technology. Like I'm a geek, although I'm not a developer. So even with a chief technical officer role, I was kind of hesitant to take that title because I'm like, I'm not a developer. I don't have. I was like, I'm going to take it. But anyway, that the tech is just really one aspect to it. It's one of the things that's really cool about it. Is like we all can play a part of it, even if you're not a developer, even if you're not an economist. Like there's so many different areas where people can contribute to, and so many areas where people will benefit from. It's not just one area of technology. It's not just one area of this or that. It's the entire thing, and this movement really has the power to really push everything forward within our world. I mean, I say blockchain shouldn't be used for everything, and that's true. But it's more of the concept, of all of this. Like you mentioned IPFS, and I'd like to talk a bit more after this with that. So, I mean, with Consortio, so we're open to a lot of different technologies, not just blockchain, but it really changed the paradigm of everybody in this space, right? So that's why I don't consider myself a Bitcoin maximalist. I like the other technologies as well, because I'd like to find out what really works. I mean, there's not a lot of data out there on this. Like, this is what's going to work. It's like, when was that done, right?
Yeah.
I mean, of course, there's some things to keep in mind to avoid scams and all of this other stuff too, but just this whole push that I can interact with you and just you, and not need to have a third party say that yes, you can do that, no, you can't do that. That's just really powerful.
Yep.
That'll really, I mean, I used to play this game called Neopets back in the early 2000s, and I actually when I got to college, I was roommates with an economics PhD guy, and I said, hey, you should do research on how open ecosystems could work. And I mean, for me back in the early 2000s, like, it was fun. I was sending neopoints to somebody in Sweden, to somebody in the United States, somebody in Denmark, like bought something from my store, and that was really cool back in 2001. And like, to me, I was like, I'd like to see this move forward, and we're seeing that with cryptocurrency. So it's yeah, again, as I said, you don't need to be a developer. You don't need to fully understand the technical, how the gears are running. You can just see how it can impact society as a whole and find your role in it, whatever it may be, maybe graphic speaker, you're an educator, or whatever,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I fully agree. I mean, I think this is about everybody. That's the point.
Exactly.
This is not, and that's kind of why sometimes I get into some kind of contentious exchanges with some people in the community, who talk about, well, it doesn't matter about bigger block sizes because you can get a terabyte hard drive for $100. Listen, I mean, is this technology for people who don't give a shit about $100, or are we actually trying to help to people that are unbanked in India, right? Like, is that, like, who is this technology for? What exactly is it that we're trying to achieve here? And why do we not want to factor in the cost of storage and the cost of computational resources, right? Like, I'm really excited about Ethereum and 2.0 and Casper and the implementation of proof of stake, right? I think proof of stake is an incredibly promising technology, And, I think this idea that only people who can afford, $1,000 Bitmain ASIC miner with a fan that runs at 10,000 RPM, right?
Mhm.
And where are you going to put that? You're going to have that in your living room, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like the barriers to entry to proof of work are quite significant. They are quite significant. And I think proof of stake, this idea that you can just have software on your 5-year-old laptop and, go for it, run it.
Yeah.
And there's your full node, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
that's why I liked NXT. NXT
yeah,
was the first 100% proof of stake one, and Ardor, which uses the technology, is the same development team. Also uses proof of stake. I actually, what you just said with the lab. That's why I had to. Sorry, I had to interrupt really quickly. Um, I was like, my laptop contributes to the entire world ecosystem,
yep,
and I was like, wow, if I'm able to say that, that's going to be fantastic.
yep,
Right? I mean, yeah, it only plays a small part, but again, going back to the whole SETI thing, like it doesn't matter. I feel more connected because I'm taking a more active role.
absolutely.
And yeah, I mean, it's just I like you. I mean, with the block size debates, like the rhetoric from both sides, I didn't like it, but because they ignored a lot of aspects to it, both sides again. But with the whole thinking about users, thinking about how people will react to things. Yeah, making things more accessible and easy to not just access but take part of, because that's really what's going to make them not just be a passive user. And if they just want to be a passive user, that's fine. But if there are a lot of people who are very much willing to take the step from passive to active, if only that there was an easy way for them to do that. And yeah, absolutely, with proof of stake. And I mean, with a decentralized ecosystem, I don't think proof of work is an ideal structure. I mean, with peer-to-peer digital cash, I think it's a bit better, but proof of stake for a decentralized ecosystem is in terms of consensus algorithms versus proof of work is much better. Is
Yeah,
there one that's better than proof of stake? Possibly, but I don't know which one yet. But for now, I think proof of stake solves the issue. I mean, yeah, you can run, and there's a guy. His name is Sazan on Twitter. He has a solar powered Raspberry Pi node for NXT. I mean, that's really cool.
yeah.
It's pretty awesome. But yeah, with the proof of stake thing with Ethereum, I'm very confused as to why a lot of people were surprised about that. Like Vitalik was one of the first people who pushed proof of stake, like back in 2012, with the Bitcoin Magazine article, I think. And I mean, he was talking about it positively in 2013, and I think even then he said like, yeah, when Ethereum's going to come out, sorry, 2014, early 2014, the Miami Bitcoin conference, like I think that's when he said it. That eventually Ethereum is going to be proof of stake, and then people are still fighting against that today. And it's just like you knew when you signed up for this, you knew what you were getting into. You should have known this.
Yeah.
But again, there's a whole social aspect around it.
Yeah, the people that are resistant to it are the people that sunk money into the hardware.
Yep.
Those are and that's not a good argument. That's not a good
Yep.
argument. Well, what am I going to do with all the money I spend on my hardware?
That they
And
got money out of, yeah.
and it's like, well, I mean, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, right? Like that's not because you bought hardware that is now unnecessary. We're going to hold back the ecosystem just for you because you're so important, right? Like,
Yeah. Absolutely.
at that point,
Like for me, I mean,
it's like what we're saying. We're saying, well, because the incumbents. Well, we don't want to disintermediate the incumbents. How's J.P. Morgan supposed to make money in the future, right?
yeah,
It's a similar argument, right? Like,
absolutely.
I don't
So
really give a shit about J.P. Morgan, and to a certain extent, I don't really give a shit about Bitcoin miners,
mhm.
right? I don't really care about Bitmain and ASIC mining farm operators. That doesn't keep me up at night, right? I can sleep just fine if in 5 or 10 years those people, they just have to throw their computers in the garbage. Like that's, I don't care. And
Yeah,
if they
and the thing
don't,
is, they probably would have had to do that anyway a year later when they had to have to update their hardware anyway to stay competitive. Like
yeah,
it's not something out of their mindset that they have to throw that stuff away.
yeah,
Um, so the analogy I wanted to bring up is like more like with antiques. Like I'm an antique collector. Some people would think like, oh, you're a person who tries to prevent hardware like development. It's like no, just because I'm not like a techie in terms of hardware, doesn't mean I'm not a fan of things moving forward.
hmm
And in terms of becoming more efficient,
yeah,
again, business systems different from user systems, but um, look, I mean, I use typewriters. I have a record player,
hmm
but if I was big, if I was around during the time where I was like fighting against computers because I said people should be using more typewriter, I wouldn't do that. No, I'd be like, no, no. I mean, this. I'm not going to hold the entire economy back because I want my typewriter to stay valuable. It's like it's something that it's kind of selfish to be honest. Like if people are saying like I'll hold the entire ecosystem back because of my needs.
hmm
I mean, this is a bit of a contentious point, but like in Svalbard, there was a big pushback against coal mining.
hmm
Um, and but then also there were some coal miners there who said like no, we'll keep this up, and I'm like, the coal market is, I mean, all of the even environmental stuff aside, your coal mining doesn't bring much profit, period, because
yeah,
the coal that you have is not that valuable and in demand anymore around the world. um, and you're saying that the government should spend money to continue letting you do your operations because that's the only way you knew how to live life? No,
in
that's not
China,
fair.
they have this concept of the iron rice bowl.
Iron
And
rice bowl. What's that?
it's like when the government, through a state-owned enterprise, creates a job for someone who's useless, and
Mm,
then they call that the iron rice bowl. Well, we can't let these people starve to death, right?
yeah.
And you know um I feel like at this point, we understand kind of the economics involved in things like universal basic income. Like we're, there's no need to subsidize, the horse buggy industry, right? The
Hmm.
horseshoe smith, right? We're not going to make the government hire a bunch of horseshoe smiths
Hmm.
and a bunch of people to build horse-drawn carriages in 2019, right? Like these people, they went away, and if they're starving to death, we can give them a UBI, right? Like that's fine. But another point that I want to bring up also about proof of stake, the interesting thing about it, right? Right now, if we look at uh, kind of the Bitcoin ecosystem, where you have a lot of miners, not necessarily just all one big giant mining farm, but you have a lot of these miners joining mining pools.
Hmm.
Um, if you were able to corrupt the top three mining pools, you would actually be able to execute a 51% attack,
Yep.
allowing things like double spending of Bitcoins,
Hmm.
right? You could actually corrupt the Bitcoin network by corrupting the top three mining pools, right? So
Yep.
proof of work is actually quite centralized when you think about it.
Well, I
Um,
would say it goes a bit beyond that. I would say it's well, again, separate from peer-to-peer digital cash, but in terms of like a decentralized ecosystem, it cannot be built on proof of work because uh, with I mean, I'm just going to give an example. Let's say a nefarious miner has 10%, just 10%
mhm,
of the entire mining power, and decides to censor all transactions and process zero. The
mhm,
protocols actually allow for that. Okay, for you and me, that if the, let's say on Ethereum, the confirmation time is 14 seconds.
mhm,
All right, I'll just wait for another 14 seconds. Why not? And then if another miner gets it, most likely it's a 90% chance. It's pretty high. Then
mhm,
I'll get it in one block. But think about this: like if entire decentralized ecosystem is around that, being able to censor 10% of the transactions and delay everything by 14 seconds, increasing the mempool and all of these other disruptive stuff. Yeah, that's going to damage the ecosystem much more than people think. Maybe they get even more power. That's 25%. And then now let's say there's an entire it's a global decentralized ecosystem, and let's say that there's big transactions happening in, let's say, in the Netherlands, and it's not a lot of data that's being transferred also, like let's say in the most efficient way, just under assumption, and having that shortened, and having that encounter so many issues, because it's also probabilistic and not deterministic. So they're not able to say like, okay, we're not going to be able to get into this block, we're not going to this. No, they don't know. So it just really disrupts in a bad way how that decentralized ecosystem can flow. I mean, there's a lot of arguments around economic incentives, but economic incentives aren't the only incentives out there. There's also social incentives, and to be honest,
state level actors that might want to ruin your network.
Exactly. And the economic incentive, I mean, there's this, they talk about game theory a lot, but the thing is, there's multiple games being played. It's not just one game. So you might lose in this game, but you're willing to take the loss because you're going to win in the game that you actually care about.
Yep.
And that's exactly what's good. But that's exactly the thing in this scenario. So like, let's say it's a rogue government that's just trying to get negotiating power to other countries around the world. It's like, so now with this country, they're doing that. They're mining at a loss. They're processing zero transaction. Maybe they get the block reward, but that's nothing compared to how much they're spending. But now they can go to, let's say, like I brought up the Netherlands, it's screwing up something that's going on there. Just as an example, this government official just goes there and says, hey, how about this? We stopped doing what we stopped censoring your transactions, and only yours, but you let us let this thing happen, whatever it may be, exploiting the natural resources or whatever. Then it becomes in the Netherlands' best decision to say, yeah, okay, you can do that, so that we can go about. And so they just won the game. They just won the game that they cared about.
Yeah, but on the other hand,
they lost the game that they didn't care about.
Yes, and on the other hand, when it comes to a system like proof of stake, right?
Yes.
In order to execute a 51% attack, you can't just corrupt the administrators of the top three mining pools. You have to buy 51% of the currency.
Exactly.
Right? And then there's a lot of problems with that. Number one, as you're buying it, there's not 51% liquidity of this currency on all the exchanges, right? So,
exactly.
So it takes time to get that position, right? And then as you're buying it, the price is going up because now you're removing all the liquidity. So now the price of the currency is going up as you're trying to buy 51% of it.
Yep.
Right? And then once you have 51% of the currency, right, you've spent a tremendous amount of money, and you're going to do something that is going to invalidate the value of your currency, right? So you've spent all of this money, and now in order for you to execute the 51% attack, if the other validators on the network observe that you're doing some funky shit, right?
Yep.
Then number one, worst case, like if you really do something really horrible, they can just fork away and say, well, fuck you then. And then now all the money that you spent on that currency is worthless, right? Yes. So the cost prohibitive nature of performing a 51% attack on a proof of stake currency is extremely high. And even if you can achieve a 51% attack on a proof of stake currency, again, that would still be transparent to other validators, and they would be able to like look at what happened with like the DAO attack, right? They forked. They just forked that. They just forked they just forked their way out of that problem, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have a state level actor that buys up 51% of the currency and tries to do something that would devalue that currency, right? the rest of the network could just say, okay, well, fuck you, we're forking away. You can keep your tokens, but the network no longer recognizes those tokens, and we just don't give a shit about you anymore, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
So,
it's transparent. It's more transparent that way. And I mean, you can't fork off a miner. You can't. I
yeah,
mean, okay, you can maybe like fork off and then stop allowing ASICs, but I mean, you can't fork off that specific miner. You're gonna
right,
have to hit everybody.
yeah,
I mean, and also again, in terms of a decentralized ecosystem, like the fact that somebody can rent and we've seen this in the BCH and BSV
mm-hmm,
uh, war, so to
mm-hmm,
say. They, you know, with Bitcoin.com, they rented a lot of miners, and they used essentially people's BTC miners, and had that used for whatever Roger wanted.
mm-hmm,
And it just, the fact that somebody can just do that, right, to attack a network and force it into what they want if they have the money.
mm-hmm.
Again, people say like, oh, people aren't going to do that because of economic incentives. Like, I don't think Roger made money on that, by the way. So, economic incentives is not everything. Again, yeah, but that couldn't happen on a proof of stake platform. Like, yeah, what they would need to do is to buy, and then and you mentioned liquidity, but what could happen is that when a decentralized ecosystem is so used, that's not that those coins aren't going to be on exchanges. Those coins are going to be on user accounts or business accounts or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
that's actually being used.
Right.
They're there in those accounts to be used. They're not an exchange to be sold. So this person can buy out the entire exchange and still not have even 51%.
Yeah, there's a possibility that they wouldn't even be able to buy the 51% attack, right?
Exactly.
If there's not enough, if there's not 51% liquidity, then you
Yeah,
cannot execute a 51% attack on a proof of
exactly.
stake currency. So
Exactly.
proof of stake does it, number one, it lowers the barriers to entry so that um, you can just run a full node on ubiquitous hardware, right? So
Hmm.
anybody can participate, right? As long as the running the node is just a push button installer and it's quite user friendly, anybody can run a node on their 5-year-old laptop. And the other thing is, so it lowers the barrier to entry and it increases the security.
Yep. Yeah. No, I mean that's why I followed NXT and Ardor for such a long time and got really involved, because in terms of decentralized ecosystem, it's just proof of stake is just much better than proof of work. Again, separate from P2P digital cash if you just focus on that. But um, there's the other aspect also with the transparent forging thing, and just being able to see if let's say this person was able to get 51% in the early days, and or maybe not even 51%, but just it gets a decent amount of the forging power or the mining power, whatever you want to call it. um, they can still kind of disrupt the network if they wanted to. But if with transparent forging, you're able to see kind of like, because it's more deterministic with proof of stake, you're able to like forecast a little bit, and you're not going to say like, oh, this person will suddenly have a crap ton of coins soon.
Right.
Like you'll be able to see that the transaction being announced in the mempool and adjust your calculations from that point.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like somebody's going to flip a switch and you don't know where that switch is going towards all of a sudden. Yeah, you're able to see like, okay, so the entire community, as you mentioned, like they can just fork off. So when they see like, hey, there's somebody attacking, so even before the attack actually happens, they're able to see that it's about to happen and fork off before that.
Right.
Like that's just really powerful,
Yeah.
right? I mean, yeah, there's now a chain split, and now there's two chains, but there's the chain where the attacker is on, and there's a chain where everybody else is on. And guess which one will be actually the real one? Yeah, this person has maybe more forging power, mining power, whatever, but where if everybody else is here, that's going to be the real one.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I mean, I understand that like mining power decides like forks or forging power, whatever, but in terms of where the community goes, it's a completely different topic.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's a lot, again, Bitcoin was cool.
Mm-hmm.
I still have a non-zero position in Bitcoin, right? And what's interesting about Bitcoin is we have to remember, right? Like all of these other ideas that are neat, right? Like for example, Mimblewimble and Casper on Ethereum and all of these other ideas that may not be 100% proven yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
When it gets to a point where it's bulletproof. It works really well. Like Bitcoin, the one thing that we can say about Bitcoin is it's been up and running for 10 years,
Yeah.
right? It's solid. It's proven itself, right? So any changes to the existing granddaddy mainline Bitcoin protocol should go through their paces, right? They should definitely have to prove themselves that, yeah, actually this Mimble Wimble thing, yeah, that's pretty bulletproof, right?
Mhm.
And once it achieves a certain standard of actually being demonstrably good, right?
Mhm.
There's nothing preventing the Bitcoin community from just
Mhm.
adopting those variations, right? Like Bitcoin could implement Mimble Wimble, and Bitcoin could implement proof of stake, right? There's
Mhm.
nothing really stopping them from doing that. It's just software. It's just all a bunch of completely open source software, right? So,
Yeah.
and so basically, if at some point in the future, you go to Coin Market Cap and you see, oh, Bitcoin is about to lose its Bitcoin dominance, and there's this new hotness that everybody's way more interested in, and it's most likely it's going to be Ether or Ethereum, right? Most
Mhm.
likely, because that's number two.
Mhm.
Right? If at some point, because Ethereum is just out innovating Bitcoin, there's nothing stopping the Bitcoin core developers from just copying and pasting that code into the Bitcoin core client and releasing a new version and having a protocol update, right? So the thing that Bitcoin has going for it is that it has the name. It's Bitcoin,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
It's Bitcoin. Everybody knows about Bitcoin. My mom's heard about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is on all the news. People are talking about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the Bitcoin. There's no other Bitcoin, right? So it
Mhm.
has the branding, it has the user adoption, it has that network effect, sort of, right? It has the biggest market capitalization, right? Which is important. But as soon as one of these other cryptocurrencies starts to take away from that, right? Like potentially Ethereum, right?
Mhm.
There's absolutely nothing stopping Bitcoin from rolling those changes into
Yeah.
their core client. So
Yep.
that's what's nice, right? So again,
Absolutely.
I'm glad that Bitcoin exists.
Mhm.
I don't understand Bitcoin Cash, right? Just making the block size larger doesn't solve scalability at all, right? Like it doesn't. We need 1,000,000 TPS, and they've gone from 7 to 96. I don't see how that's really solving anything, but whatever. People tried that, and we observe they got 1/30th of the market capitalization, and they got very little hash power away from the Bitcoin miners, right? Bitcoin
Mhm.
remained king, and
Mhm.
nobody really gave a shit about Bitcoin Cash, and absolutely nobody gives a shit about Bitcoin SV, right? Bitcoin Satoshi's vision, Craig
I
Wright.
actually follow both of them a little bit, but for other reasons.
Right, sure. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm in some groups that are drinking some Bitcoin Cash Kool-Aid, and I've tried to understand, like, right, like there's other things like Beam and Grin,
Mhm.
and Monero, and Zcash, and again
Mhm.
Ethereum. Obviously, Ethereum. There's plenty of other things going on in the space that I think are innovative and interesting, and I'm very happy that like we're sending all of these space monkeys into space, and
Mhm.
I'm glad the space monkeys exist, and thank you for your service, right?
Yeah.
So that's just my view on it.
Yep.
um, but like being able to take away the advantage that Bitcoin has just in terms of its branding, right?
Yeah.
Just the
That's gonna.
Bitcoin, right? Like just the one that's called Bitcoin
Mhm.
has a massive advantage, right?
Yes.
Bitcoin
Absolutely.
Cash cannot,
No.
like, it's like the one that's called Bitcoin
Hmm.
is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. And the ones that are not Bitcoin, they have to do some pretty serious innovation.
Yes,
And they have to,
absolutely.
right? Like if Ethereum 2.0 does solve scalability with sharding, right? With a bunch of side chains, and they actually implement it and it works, and there's no hacks, and it's solid and it's bulletproof, and then it runs without any issues for a couple of years,
Hmm.
you know, um, that'll be cool. That'll
Yep.
be cool, right? So I'm excited and I'm glad that all of these things exist, because I see down the rabbit hole, right? Like the potential
Yep.
for disintermediating and bringing about a real true democracy to the world. And that's what I'm
Absolutely.
excited about. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like that you mentioned that, Bitcoin, and not just Bitcoin, but a lot of the other platforms can just copy what the other ones are doing. And that's the beauty of open source. And for me, that's actually not a bad thing. I mean, you know, the fact that I can build on what others are building on. I mean, okay, like it's some parts of Ethereum are GPL v3, so Bitcoin can't easily add that in because
Mhm.
Bitcoin uses MIT. I
Mhm.
don't know exactly how the licensing will work if there's two different licenses and one multi-license software exists, but it gets a bit tricky. But anyway, that aside, so this doesn't become a legal discussion. Um, yeah, it's fantastic how. I mean, that's why I love various other open source projects outside of cryptocurrency. I like that whole approach with like the Linux Foundation, the projects under there. Um, I, I I go to a lot of Linux Foundation events. I spoke at two last year. I'm hoping to speak at one again later this year. It's um, I mean, just how people were completely fine with building on each other's ideas and how they encourage, like, hey, if you're going to use my code, can you let me know?
Mhm.
And if you make it better, let me know too, so I can fix mine and make that better too. And it's
Mhm.
just a fantastic, like, it's a very collaborative thing, and I hope to see more of that in the cryptocurrency space. And I think once this whole interoperability thing gets a bit better, I think we're going to see that, and then it's completely fine for features to be copied in from one to the other. Um, and then I agree completely that the Bitcoin brand, that's the strongest thing, and that's why other platforms have to, you know, we already know that there's so many different platforms that have better innovation, but the brand, you because of the brand, you need to do much more than just beating them. You
Mhm.
need to do so much more than that. And but the nice thing is for people who are Bitcoin maximalists, if they are, it's yeah, the core team can just not the core team, but anybody can propose to implement that into the Bitcoin protocol using a BIP.
Yeah.
It's definitely possible. And so, again, I agree with you also about it becoming more of a true democracy, because then I have a choice. I have better options.
Mhm.
Um, it's more options, more freedom, and so this provides me more options. So I love it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I agree. So,
Okay, well, I thought this was a pretty phenomenal conversation. I think we covered a lot of ground.
yeah, my laptop's actually about to die.
Oh, awesome, awesome, perfect timing, perfect timing. Yeah, I had that happen to me a couple of times during my earlier conversations on this channel. My battery died, um, and then I had to get my charger out, and I had to actually like plug in my laptop for these conversations, because I've noticed that they actually do go on quite a bit. Right? Some of these conversations are quite long. So anyway, was there anything else that you wanted to cover? Did you want to plug your social media? Was there anything that we didn't discuss that you wanted to bring up?
Well, I guess I just want to say, like, for anybody who's watched this long so far already, thank you for watching. It's like, yeah, it's been fun talking to you, George. But also, yeah, I'll put my social media in the comments on your YouTube, or maybe you can add it in the site description, in the page description, sorry, later.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm starting a new journey. I mean, I've tried starting my own thing with the consulting company Agavon, and then
Mhm.
with the wallet Altreon, and Altreon will still be there. But yeah, keep track of what I'm doing now with Consortio Group. It's the group of people there. They're awesome, and it's not just blockchain. Again, it's a lot of different emerging technologies. So with George, I'd love to talk more about BFS. It's something that I'm not so proficient in. So yeah, just looking forward to more technological innovation that impacts society in a positive way.
Awesome. Yeah. Great. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, thanks again for doing this. I really appreciate you making the time.
I appreciate you having me on. Thank you very
Yep. You're
much.
welcome. Okay. Have a good one. Bye.